All right, welcome back to The Verdict. We've been listening to the INEC chairman and looking at the collation process, the counting and the results in different states. Before we left the collation center, we had about 5 states. Now we have some other states, though Ondo is still, we're still waiting for the results there. The collation officer and the REC seemed a little bit confused about the figures, and we could hear the audience speak loud when the results were being called out. So the INEC chairman asked them to look at it and come back later. At this point, they're not ready yet. But we do have the figures now, the result for Kogi as well as Gombe State. One of the things that we've been discussing on the panel here is the difference between the total number of people registered against the total number of accredited voters and then against the final figure, seeing a bit of a disparity there. Let me put it back to you, Ms. Benitie. What do you think of the ones we've heard so far, that's Kogi and Gombe, as well as Nasarawa?
I mean, I think we're still doing poorly in the attendance. I mean, the accreditation is looking far away from those who registered. And I think that is a big question, that maybe there was a big apathy within the system and the society, and that's not really looking good. But I was looking at the Global Competitive Index. There's something called the Global Competitive Index that has 12 pillars. The first pillar that they expect, each government that wants to move a nation forward has to look at those pillars. It's something that has been researched across the nations, discussion, debates. And the number 1 pillar is institutions. And we are 125 out of 137. But there's something under each of these institutions that, I mean, each of the pillars, they tell you they break it down of the things that they are looking at.
Components. The
component of it. And there's one here that caught my attention. It's called public trust in politicians. We are at 130 over 137. In other words, the last 4 years of this government and the previous governments, the trust in government is low, is still in politicians. Meaning that, why am I coming out to vote? You know, people can say, my vote will not count. My vote will not count. So invariably, whether at INEC level or governance, the government level, we're still having a challenge with people trusting the process. Because if over 1 million people collected, were registered, and you now have less than, in some places, 50%, less than 50. That's very saddening for people who say that our democracy is progressing. It seems to be regressing. So many people at home, they didn't go out, and places like hotspots like Gombe, was it the issue of security? Was it the issue of weather? Was it the issue of logistics to get to the polling places? This calls to bear that as a nation, we are not doing the fundamentals to get our people involved.
Mr. Olugbenle, 6 states plus the FCT is what we've seen so far. What do you think? Do you agree with her?
Now, it was just running through my mind. We have 14 million new voters that have just registered in the last 4 years. So the people that are actually coming out now, how many of these 14 million are actually coming out? Or did they just do that to fulfill all requirements? We also spoke earlier on about why just 50% turnout? It occurred, I mean, we've mentioned that earlier on. A number of them actually registered, not because they actually had any intentions of voting, but because their church or their mosque or their bus or the ministry that they belong to insisted that if you don't bring your voter card, you will not get X, Y, Z. So a number of people did register just to fulfill that. And now the turnout, apathy. So I'm asking myself, because at my voting center in VGC, the external part of it, there were 2 centers in VGC. There was the field part of it, and there was the external part of it. I can't recall seeing any younger person. And that's where you really would love, you would have seen younger people. Somebody did say on social media that in his own polling unit, there were young people. But over I mean, wherever I've seen, I don't think the young people did come out. Maybe they did participate on social media and all of that and all that.
And
but
that had been an issue even before the poll.
I'm not sure.
It had been an issue to say that even though they have the highest population in terms of the voting and the registration, would they come out?
Yes. So I'm not sure they did come out. I'm not sure.
I was going to say, looking at the Gombe, for instance, I was trying to run through, and I came across a figure in 2015. Okay. Now, what we have in 2014 seems to be higher in terms of number of votes, for instance. Okay. So, in 2015, compared to what's now?
No, how about the accreditation, the number of people that registered?
I didn't get that one. I just got the result here. So, what they had before was 361,245 to 96873. Okay. Now what they have is 42961 to 138,484. So apparently the number of voters now, the number of votes that are valid is higher, whichever we want to put it together and also. But this says, going by that issue of trust, this says more people came out, again, covering the increased number of voters registered. So more people came out on their more valid votes. But the impact, in terms of impact on the voting population, why is it that, for instance, there are a lot of complaints on social media. Nigerians are complaining. They're complaining about the fact that this, that, we don't want this, we want that, and all of that. In fact, someone says in Africa, the electorate fight themselves while the politicians celebrate themselves.
Exactly.
Why is that so?
Okay.
Both of you can answer.
It's still part of the cultural issues that we have. And also, you always need to ask, when a people behave in a way, there's some intelligence behind it. It may be known to them, it may be unknown to them. So where is this intelligence coming from, whether known or unknown? Who discipled them? Who mentored them? Who raised them? So we have a generation that has been raised in a particular way and will keep behaving that way. I think it's Isaac Newton, yes, Isaac Newton that says a body will remain at rest or in a state of perpetual motion until it is acted upon by an exogenous factor or something external to it. This thing will continue this way. Nigeria typically is what you will see across Africa, unless somebody is doing something differently. So we're going to continue this way until we deliberately sit down and say, okay, I think somebody has mentioned DNA. What kind of a nation do we want to be? What must be the ethos? What must be the values that will give us that nation? What must be the behave that will give us that nation?
But they also say, aren't we too old to begin to sit down to ask that question?
If we are not getting anywhere, then we're not too old. Age is not a factor of how long you've been around. It's a factor of how well you have moved towards maturity and development. So we really need to sit down and say, you know what, this is what we want to become and this is how we're going to get there. Look at our curriculum. Okay, I just remember something. Look at our curriculum. A British royal was asked, why do you send your children to a military academy and the commons go to your regular schools? And he says, you raise the royals to give command. You raise the commons to take instructions. The British curriculum we have inherited is a curriculum that teaches us to follow instructions, which is why you get a question, the first thing that is written in bold capital letters at the top, follow instructions carefully. We are not mentored and trained to take command, which is why, sad to say, you find out people in public service, no matter what level you are, you still write, I am directed to inform you that. And when you are signing off, you sign for. So there is no initiative put on the table.
Okay.
So we're just a
Mr. Benitie,
I'm sorry. At this point, are we beating ourselves up too much about this turnout? Because since we've been talking about turnout, I'm looking at even the most advanced democracies. Yes. In the last 40 years or so in the U.S., Obama's ascendancy brought about the highest levels of voter turnout for presidential elections that they had seen. Typically, their turnout hovers between 30, 35%.
To 40 and all that. Yeah.
You know, Obama took it higher than that. So are we beating ourselves up? Because ours is
I
about
don't think so.
The same.
For a people who came out in 2015 wanting a change, the numbers and the actions that are following does not really
Support
it. It doesn't support it. So you would expect that between 2015 and 2019 right now, the groundswell will be a lot higher. If I go back to what Newton says, he says to move a body, you need a force greater than that. And force is a function of two things, the mass and the acceleration. How many people are impacting, working, and how aggressively are they working? So if we want to change Nigeria, we should naturally see more people working aggressively and
the
in
thing is
concert,
that
and we're
even
not
when
seeing it.
like he's talking about how we're talking about the turnout, what happens even when people do turn out? In Ekiti, you had about 12,577 votes rejected. You just heard Gombe about how many units there were cancelled. So even when you eventually turn out, you don't have the full representation of the turnout in terms of number of votes cast.
Okay, so we go back to this. We must approach this issue as a system. And you are as strong as the weakest link. It's not just about people turning out. What kind of people are turning out? What kind of education do they have? And like she said, what is the spirit? What is the character? So we must take this not as an event, but as a process. So if we want 2023 to be different, then we must start to do things differently.
We're almost out of time. But Mrs. Benitie, just way into this. So Senegal had election yesterday, and they're done, kind of. But we're still here. Let's look at the issue of the collation. We had a rec who came in there and a scope who came in there, and they were going back
That's
and
for
forth
Ondo.
For Ondo. What does that say about our processes?
We have a lot of responses looking at that process, you know, and some people are commenting about the fact that one of them was even laughing.
I mean, it was quite embarrassing that maybe someone needed a new pair of glasses and didn't get it on time before he traveled or forgot it. But it's quite embarrassing because you're dealing with lecturers and VCs, so something went wrong there and we need to investigate that. But also responding to Ladi issues about the modern nations and Western nations, we must recognize that they are at the epic of the society, so they can decide to stretch and relax and take a Kool-Aid. But here, we have to move forward and we need momentum. And so if we are losing steam at this level, there's a crisis. And that's why now you have a process. Senegal, there can be an argument that they are small, right? But then, small means one state. So many states that are so-called small states, I don't know whether they missed their flights or they need to get here on time. Simply put, whether it's at infrastructure level, the first fundamental pillars of competitiveness, we are slow on it. Why? Because we haven't had a discussion around the nation that we want. We're perpetually having elections, but I think we're doing ourselves a disservice of all these electional things without having leadership that wants to have a conversation. I mean, the issue of the confab is almost getting lost in our national discussion and conversation. And that was a time for us to discuss the nation we want. Nations actually have those kind of discussion. And when you look at the number of people coming out per registration, it speaks that there are other fundamental factors that were ignored or not investigated or encouraged. But I would just propose that I feel that after the 1 week postponement, there was a sense of apathy. For some people got discouraged. But I'm even shocked that at least down south, there was a sense of, we got to get this right, we got to get it right. But education is involved in progressive society. When a society is predominantly illiterate and has a bandwagon mentality, you have Rankadede here, you have Kabiesi, you have all sorts of bowing down to certain figures who over the years have not done anything for their people. But their people feel that they need to survive. So nations like Nigeria in the last couple of years, as I watched the scenario and I compared them to other nations, somebody made a comment, said, what is it in it for me as in Nigeria? Made that kind of slim, flimsy statement. And I said to them, I actually went back to think because Lin Kuan Yew made a statement that he had to make sure that he gave the Singaporeans a stake in the nation. And I think one of the weapons he used was housing. He gave them housing at 5%, so everybody owned a house. In short, in Singapore, almost everybody is settled. So he said, and they asked him, why did you do that? He said, when I asked them to go and fight for their nation, they know they are fighting for themselves. So the sense of ownership of Nigeria has not happened. Let's be
It's at that point that we're going to have to leave it. We'll completely run out of time.
Yes.
Mrs. Benitie,
Yes.
thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
As well as Mr. Olugbenle, thank you so much for joining us on this segment.
Thank you.
I'm sure you will continue to watch the unfolding of the results.
Yes.
Because at the point, we'll bring you back later on.
Thank you so
much.
much.
We'll take a break. We'll be right back. All right, a warm welcome back to the verdict here on Channels Television. We thank you for staying tuned with us. We're back with two very senior lawyers because we're talking about collation and results, and people ask the question, why do you have to read every little thing?
Yes.
There's a difference between what you see on the graph and what is actually read by the person who did the compilation. That was said to me by a lawyer at some point when you asked that question. But now we have two senior lawyers here. You want to do the honors?
Yes, we have the Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Adeyinka Olumide Fusika. Thank you for joining us. And we also have Channels Television's election consultant and legal practitioner, Mr. Fola Afawori. Thank you for joining us again. And I know you were here with us
Yes,
a couple of days ago,
Indeed, I was.
trying to talk about how this process should be credible, etc. So, what's your opinion of the collation so far and the results announced?
Well, look, it's not a legal issue, really. It's a process
It
issue.
might soon be.
Might soon be, yes, because we do tend to amend the Electoral Act after each experience. But I think it's a bit, to me, it's a bit cumbersome. It's a bit...
Could you expatiate?
It's this reading of the figures and each party, 11 votes, 12 votes, 13 votes. It might, I mean, surely our lack of trust, right? That does not mean that we should reduce things to, for me, first of all, the idea of all, and I'm looking at the operational thing, the cost element. I think our elections are expensive, the process is expensive, everybody having to come to Abuja in the modern age where you can transfer information, you know, by electronics. It seems too much theater for such a simple, for me it's not such a difficult thing to have the recs in their various headquarters, and they could all speak from there, so you could have them live and then transmit the results, which have presumably been signed off by party agents. So I think it's too clumsy. There's a cost. Look, you have 36 states. You don't have airports in all the 36 states. And even where you have airports, you don't necessarily have operations in the airports. So there's a cost, there's time, et cetera, et cetera.
There's risk.
There's risk, you know, and so on and so forth. I think we should try and, like I always said, one of the problems of our systems is that they generate anxiety. The more you delay, the longer it takes for you. People just think, aha, they must be up to something.
But if they didn't go through the stress of showing you that this figure,
Yes.
you know, is a result of
They're
the process,
still going to challenge it anyway.
Okay.
So let's, I mean, come on.
But maybe INEC is running away from some parties suing them for asking the recs to send in the report.
No, there's no, you have to sue, as my distinguished colleague will say, you have to have a cause of action. These are, for me, these are administrative matters, right? Yes, there's legal up to a point, but the rest is really at the discretion of the chief executive, of the umpire, etc. So those are my thoughts on the matter.
No, but both of you are lawyers, so I'm going to ask your learned brother beside you. I'm going to ask him, every time this question comes up, can we have it faster, can it, than the administration? They say there's a legal framework within which it is operating.